Picture this. You're standing in the ruins of ancient Rome, surrounded by crumbling marble columns that once held up the greatest empire the world has ever known. The wind carries whispers of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled this vast domain while penning thoughts that would outlive his legions. What made him different from every other ruler who sought power and glory? What allowed him to maintain his sanity and strength while managing an empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East, while dealing with plagues, wars, and the constant threat of assassination? The answer lies in a philosophy so powerful, so transformative, that it has guided humanity's greatest leaders, thinkers, and survivors for over 2,000 years. Today, you're going to discover the 7 brutal rules that Stoics live by. Rules so profound, they can forge an unbreakable mind from the softest clay of human weakness. But before we begin this journey, ask yourself this question. What would your life look like if nothing could truly disturb your peace of mind? What if criticism rolled off you like water off a duck's back? What if failure became simply another teacher and success just another day at the office? What if you could face any challenge, any setback, any tragedy with the calm confidence of someone who understands the deeper game being played? This isn't fantasy. This isn't wishful thinking. This is the reality that awaits anyone brave enough to embrace the Stoic way of life. The ancient Stoics didn't just talk about philosophy in comfortable academic settings. They lived it in the arena of real life, in battles, in palaces, in slave quarters, and in the face of death itself. They discovered principles that don't just sound good on paper, but actually work when your world is falling apart around you. The transformation you're about to undergo isn't comfortable. It requires you to abandon the comforting lies we tell ourselves about how life should work, and embrace the sometimes harsh, but always liberating truth about how life actually works. Are you ready to build a mind so strong that external circumstances become irrelevant to your inner peace? Then let's begin with the first brutal rule that separates those with unbreakable minds from everyone else. The first rule sounds deceptively simple, yet it's so challenging that most people spend their entire lives running from it. You must accept that you control absolutely nothing except your own thoughts, decisions, and actions. Everything else, and I mean everything, lies outside your sphere of influence. This isn't pessimism. It's the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's greatest teachers, understood this better than anyone. Born into bondage, physically disabled, owned by another human being, he had every excuse to rage against his circumstances. Instead, he discovered something that his master, despite all his wealth and power, never possessed: true freedom. Epictetus taught his students that there are things within our control and things outside our control, and wisdom lies entirely in knowing the difference. When you truly grasp this distinction, when you stop wasting energy trying to control your reputation, other people's opinions, the weather, the stock market, or whether your boss promotes you, something magical happens. All that energy you've been hemorrhaging trying to control the uncontrollable suddenly becomes available for what you actually can control: your character, your effort, your responses, your choices in each moment. Imagine Marcus Aurelius receiving news that Germanic tribes had crossed the Danube and were burning Roman settlements. A lesser leader might have raged, might have cursed the gods, might have spent precious time lamenting why this had to happen during his reign. Instead, Marcus wrote in his personal journal, which we now know as his Meditations, that external events are neither good nor bad in themselves. They simply are. The only thing that matters is how we choose to respond to them. This wasn't theoretical philosophy for him. This was practical wisdom applied in the crucible of leadership during one of Rome's most challenging periods. You might be thinking, but surely some things are objectively bad. Consider this: the same rainstorm that ruins your picnic saves a farmer's crops. The same economic downturn that costs you your job forces you to discover talents you never knew you had. The same breakup that breaks your heart today becomes the reason you meet the love of your life tomorrow. The Stoics understood that our judgments about events, not the events themselves, create our suffering. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it, you discover a strength you never knew existed. This leads us naturally to the second brutal rule. You must embrace discomfort as your greatest teacher and voluntary hardship as your path to strength. While others seek comfort and ease, those with unbreakable minds deliberately expose themselves to difficulty because they understand that comfort is the enemy of growth. Seneca, despite being one of the wealthiest men in Rome, regularly practiced voluntary poverty. He would spend days eating simple food, wearing rough clothes, and sleeping on hard surfaces, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he wanted to prove to himself that his happiness didn't depend on luxury. Think about this for a moment. When have you grown the most in your life? Was it during your easiest, most comfortable periods, or was it when you were forced to dig deep and discover resources you didn't know you possessed? Every person with an unbreakable mind has learned this truth. Adversity is not your enemy, it's your trainer. The ancient Stoics had a practice called premeditatio malorum, which means premeditation of evils. This wasn't morbid pessimism, it was mental conditioning. They would regularly imagine losing everything they valued, their health, their wealth, their loved ones, their reputation, not to depress themselves, but to build resilience and appreciate what they currently had. Cato the Younger, one of the most revered Stoics in Roman history, made this practice legendary. During the harsh Roman winters, he would walk barefoot through the streets, wearing only a tunic while other senators bundled themselves in warm cloaks. When people asked why he did this, he explained that he was training his body and mind to be comfortable with discomfort. He understood that a person who can only function in perfect conditions is not truly free. When the inevitable hardships of life arrived, Cato was ready. His voluntary practice of hardship had prepared him for involuntary hardship. Modern science has validated what the Stoics knew intuitively. Controlled exposure to stress makes you more resilient to uncontrolled stress. Athletes don't become strong by avoiding weights. They become strong by gradually increasing the load. Your mind works the same way. When you voluntarily choose difficult conversations, challenging workouts, cold showers, or uncomfortable social situations, you're building psychological muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can handle more than you think you can. The third rule cuts even deeper. You must take complete responsibility for your life, regardless of what has happened to you or what circumstances you find yourself in. This isn't about blame, it's about power. The moment you accept total responsibility for your current situation, you reclaim the power to change it. Epictetus embodied this principle perfectly. He never spent time complaining about being born a slave or lamenting his physical disabilities. Instead, he focused entirely on what he could do with the circumstances he found himself in. This responsibility extends to every area of your life. Your relationships aren't failing because other people are difficult. They're struggling because you haven't learned the skills necessary to navigate human complexity. Your career isn't stagnating because the economy is bad. It's stuck because you haven't developed the value that the marketplace rewards. Your health isn't declining because of genetics. It's deteriorating because of the daily choices you make about what you eat, how you move, and how you manage stress. This might sound harsh, but it's actually the most empowering perspective you can adopt. Marcus Aurelius inherited an empire plagued by natural disasters, military threats, and political instability. He could have spent his reign complaining about the hand he was dealt. Instead, he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself in your way of thinking." He understood that even an emperor's happiness depends not on external circumstances, but on internal responses. When the Antonine Plague swept through the empire, killing millions of people, Marcus didn't rage against fate. He organized relief efforts, maintained social order, and continued to govern with wisdom and compassion. Taking responsibility doesn't mean you caused everything that happened to you. It means you accept the burden and the privilege of deciding what to do next. A Stoic doesn't waste time asking, "Why me?" Instead, they ask, "What now?" This shift in focus from victimhood to agency transforms everything. Suddenly, you're not at the mercy of circumstances. You're the author of your response to circumstances. This brings us to the fourth brutal rule that separates those with unbreakable minds from the masses. The fourth rule requires you to view every obstacle as an opportunity in disguise and every setback as a setup for a comeback. The Stoics had a phrase for this. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't positive thinking or naive optimism. It's a practical strategy for turning problems into progress. When you encounter resistance, instead of seeing it as evidence that you should give up, you see it as information about where to apply more intelligent effort. Consider the story of how Marcus Aurelius became emperor. He wasn't born to rule. He was adopted by Antoninus Pius, specifically because of his character and philosophical training. The very qualities that made him seem unsuited for political power, his introspective nature and love of philosophy, were exactly what the empire needed during its time of crisis. What appeared to be obstacles to conventional success became the foundation for extraordinary leadership. His philosophical training didn't make him weak. It made him unshakable when faced with the enormous pressures of ruling the known world. Seneca experienced this principle firsthand when he was exiled by Emperor Caligula. Instead of viewing his banishment as a catastrophe, he used the time away from Rome to deepen his philosophical studies and write some of his most profound works. The obstacle of exile became the opportunity for intellectual and spiritual growth that might never have occurred if he had remained comfortable in the capital. When he was eventually recalled and became advisor to Emperor Nero, he brought with him wisdom that could only have been forged in the crucible of adversity. This perspective transforms your relationship with difficulty. Instead of dreading challenges, you begin to welcome them because you understand they're the raw material from which strength is built. Every rejection teaches you resilience. Every failure teaches you humility and perseverance. Every criticism teaches you to separate your worth from others' opinions. Every loss teaches you what truly matters. When you stop seeing obstacles as problems and start seeing them as curriculum, life becomes your university, and every difficult experience becomes a masterclass in human potential. The fifth rule strikes at the heart of human nature. You must learn to be indifferent to praise and criticism, success and failure, pleasure and pain. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or uncaring. It means recognizing that your worth and peace of mind cannot depend on external validation or circumstances. The Stoics called this developing apatheia, which doesn't mean apathy in our modern sense, but rather freedom from destructive emotions and attachments to outcomes beyond your control. Epictetus taught that you are not your reputation, your possessions, your achievements, or your failures. You are the consciousness that observes and chooses how to respond to all of these things. When you tie your identity to external factors, you become a slave to circumstances. When someone praises you, you feel artificially elevated. When someone criticizes you, you feel unnecessarily deflated. When you succeed, you become overconfident. When you fail, you become discouraged. This emotional roller coaster exhausts your energy and clouds your judgment. Marcus Aurelius, despite being literally worshipped as a god in some parts of his empire, never let the adulation go to his head. He regularly reminded himself in his private writings that he was just a man, subject to the same limitations and mortality as everyone else. He wrote, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The most powerful man in the world understood that external praise was as irrelevant to his true worth as external criticism would be. This indifference isn't coldness, it's clarity. When you're not constantly seeking approval or avoiding disapproval, you can make decisions based on wisdom rather than fear. You can speak truth even when it's unpopular. You can take necessary risks without being paralyzed by the possibility of failure. You can enjoy success without becoming attached to it. You can endure failure without being defined by it. This emotional equilibrium becomes your superpower in a world where most people are tossed around by every opinion, outcome, and circumstance. The sixth rule demands perhaps the greatest courage of all. You must confront the reality of death not to become morbid, but to become fully alive. The Stoics practiced memento mori, remembering death, because they understood that acknowledging life's brevity gives weight and meaning to every moment. When you truly accept that your time here is limited and uncertain, you stop wasting it on trivial pursuits and start focusing on what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about death, not because he was obsessed with dying, but because he understood that remembering mortality was essential to living well. He observed that emperors and slaves, philosophers and fools all end up in the same place. This wasn't depressing to him, it was liberating. If death is the great equalizer, then the only thing that truly distinguishes one life from another is how we choose to spend our allotted time. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." Seneca, who lived under the constant threat of execution due to the political volatility of his era, used this uncertainty as fuel for intentional living. He would end each day as if it might be his last, not in a spirit of panic, but in a spirit of completion. He made sure his relationships were current, his conscience was clear, and his contributions were meaningful. This practice didn't make him morbid, it made him present. He understood that the person who is ready to die is truly free to live. This awareness of mortality serves a practical purpose. It helps you distinguish between what's urgent and what's important. When you remember that your days are numbered, you become less likely to waste them on gossip, worry, resentment, or other emotional indulgences that add no value to your life or the lives of others. You become more likely to have difficult conversations, pursue meaningful goals, express love and make decisions based on your deepest values rather than your immediate impulses. The seventh and final rule synthesizes all the others. You must live according to your highest values, regardless of external circumstances, social pressure, or personal cost. This is the ultimate test of an unbreakable mind. Anyone can be virtuous when it's easy, profitable, or popular. The Stoic remains virtuous when virtue demands sacrifice. This isn't about rigid moralism, it's about maintaining integrity with your deepest understanding of what makes life worth living. Cato the Younger demonstrated this principle in the most dramatic way possible. When Julius Caesar's forces finally cornered him in Utica, Cato faced a choice: surrender and live under Caesar's rule, or die free. For Cato, living under tyranny was incompatible with his values, even if that tyranny was benevolent. Rather than compromise his principles, he chose suicide, becoming a symbol of moral courage that inspired generations of freedom fighters. His decision wasn't about death, it was about what makes life meaningful. Epictetus taught that external circumstances can never force you to act against your values unless you choose to let them. You can be imprisoned, tortured, or killed, but you cannot be forced to lie, cheat, or betray your principles, unless you decide that avoiding pain is more important than maintaining integrity. This is the ultimate freedom that no external power can take away from you. The freedom to choose your response to any situation. This doesn't mean being inflexible or stubborn. It means being clear about your core values and then having the courage to live by them even when it's difficult. It means telling the truth even when lies would be more convenient. It means keeping your word even when breaking it would be more profitable. It means treating people with respect even when they don't reciprocate. It means doing the right thing even when no one is watching. This consistency between your values and your actions creates an inner strength that external circumstances cannot touch. Living by these 7 brutal rules doesn't make life easier, it makes you stronger. It doesn't eliminate problems, it transforms your relationship with problems. It doesn't guarantee external success, it ensures internal peace regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics understood something that modern self-help culture often misses. The goal isn't to get what you want. The goal is to become the kind of person who can handle whatever life gives you with grace, wisdom, and unshakable inner strength. As you stand now at the crossroads between your old way of thinking and this ancient path of wisdom, remember that every person who has ever developed an unbreakable mind started exactly where you are now. Marcus Aurelius wasn't born a philosopher-emperor. He chose to become one through daily practice and commitment to these principles. Seneca wasn't born wise. He developed wisdom through years of applying Stoic teachings to real-life challenges. Epictetus wasn't born free. He achieved true freedom by understanding what he could and couldn't control. The transformation begins now, with your next decision, your next response, your next choice about how to interpret the circumstances of your life. Will you continue to be tossed around by external events, or will you begin building the internal fortress that no external force can breach? Will you keep seeking happiness in things beyond your control, Or will you discover the unshakable peace that comes from mastering yourself? The ancient Stoics have shown you the way. The only question remaining is whether you have the courage to walk it. Your unbreakable mind awaits your commitment to these timeless principles that have guided humanity's strongest souls for over 2 millennia. The choice, as it always has been and always will be, is entirely yours.